I'd love to build a vehicle at a smaller budget, but something that's going to be very exotic. I said, I want to get the good gas mileage again, and I want something that was going to turn their head and say, what the heck is that? It's completely different. Familiar with seeing this, so the Chinese tried to mimic anything that becomes very popular in the US. So around that time, I'm going to say around 2012, they came up with a vehicle called the Candy Viper. The Candy Viper was a three-wheeler made in China, fiberglass body, tubular chassis, had a 250cc four-stroke motor with a little gearbox with forward, neutral, and reverse. But also used the two-pulley design for infinite variable transmission. And other than that, it was cheap. With the T-Rex, I think retail price at that time started around $65,000. I think there came across it recently, it was like $7,900 retail, and then sometimes if you found a deal. But it was like, still not, I realized it was boxy, it didn't have the styling, the motor's kind of small. I thought, it's still bigger than the Scoop Coupes. The Scoop Coupe that I had 150cc, 250s, a big step up. I said, I'm not looking to get on the highway, I'm not going to take it racing. My car enthusiasm is more from a engineering, design, and efficiency standpoint, along with the cosmetics, to look at something that's totally unique and futuristic. So here I come across this Candy Viper that was in a wreck up in New York, and it's a bidding situation, so I got a bid on it. And I remember we were invited to an anniversary party, and the time of that bid went off at like 8 o'clock at night. I'm at this party and I'm watching the bid price creep up, and I thought, my logic is wait till the last 3 minutes are left of the bidding and then just put in my bids right then and there. I ended up winning the bid. This thing was wrecked in the front end. It had a running motor. So the motor, at one point I started up the motor. I said, I got a motor, I got a drivetrain, I got a rack and pinion steering, I got a pedal box. It's automatic, so there's no clutch, but I got a pedal box with a throttle and a brake pedal and hydraulic three-wheel hydraulic brakes. I thought, this would be a great little project. So, remember when they shipped it here, it came in motorcycle carrier. And I had a neighbor come over. I had to put a hydraulic, part of it was dragging against the ground. I had to come out with my hydraulic jack and jack it up, pull the jack along with myself and another guy just to get it over to the side. I didn't put it in the garage right away. And I covered it with a tarp because it looked like a piece of junk. If anything, to me it was gold. Someone else, they're like, what the hell did you buy? I remember telling a good friend of mine who just got done redoing a Barracuda. And I said, oh, you got to see this three-wheeler I bought. I'm going to make this, you know. And as I'm talking to him, he says, is it run? I said, well, no, it's been in a wreck. Oh, you bought a sled? And I was like, yeah, you know. And it didn't dawn on me. We're both coming from the north. It's a sled. You're going to push it. It'll go downhill, but it's got no power on its own, whatever. I took my time over the next 2 years, starting out, you know, I got to figure out, I wanted to mimic the companion T-Rex in terms of style-wise and size-wise. So I ended up, I seen lots of pictures online, but in the end, by now I've been very proficient working with CAD. And I work with TurboCAD, which is kind of a knockoff of AutoCAD. It's gotten very expensive by now. And I get the professional version. And the nice thing is you can put so many layers on there. You can change things. You could save it. You could save each layer. You can turn things on and off. You can have 25 different versions on the same drawing and just play with what you're doing. So the main part was to design the chassis. So there's a local company that sells metal. I went there and I ended up buying a short piece of tubing for 1.5 inch, thin wall steel tubing. So it's a 0.62 wall, 1/16 of an inch. And I went to Harbor Freight and bought my first, what was more of a pipe bender with hydraulics. But the pipe bender, when I'd go to make my bends, would put kinks in the pipe. You'd have to kind of work it, jack it, but each time you did it, there'd be a little notch in there, and it looked really bad. And it's like, I want this thing to look a little nicer than it. And they also had a tubing bender. And I thought, before I return the hydraulic bender, let me buy the tubing bender, see how that does. And the tubing bender did the trick. It was manual. Got a big wheel, you actually tighten up on 2 wheels that actually push into the bar. You send the tubing through maybe a distance of about 2 feet, and each time you turn this big wheel around, it pushes, the rollers push the bar through. It puts about 15 degrees of bend in it. And you could do it in the opposite direction. You tighten up the one wheel, put more torque on it, and then you push it through again and it adds another 15 degrees until you get your final bend. So when I experimented with that, I started to lay out my CAD, the distance of my bend, the degree of bend, extrapolated, figured out what the bends were based on the drawings I made. So I made one-dimensional drawings of all the bends so I could see what I had. So once I got the dies and the bends laid out, and now I'm ready to build this thing, went back and I bought 140 lineal feet of this tubing. And pretty much in one day in the garage, I sat there with the pipe bender and I actually made chalk marks on the concrete in the garage to make sure my bends were symmetrical and at the right radius. Got all my bends together. I got everything welded up. I wasn't sure of the front end. I started taking some of the parts from the Candy Viper. By now, I was realizing slowly I'm basically trashing 85% of what's left of the Candy Viper. I mean, with the exception of the motor at that point, which I thought I'd still use, because nothing was going to fit. Even the steering rack was too short, but I started to modify everything. 7 screws are out, and the whole front nose is ready to come off now. So basically lift it here, start to pull it forward, work it around the get it to this point, then there's one cable to detach inside here, and you can see it. And these are nice connectors to kind of interlock, so it's not going to vibrate, plus it's got a little waterproof seal. So that's the main connector for all the electric that would be in the nose. And from here, I can take the whole nose piece. And the nose piece, by the way, only weighs about, I would say, no more than 25 pounds. Super lightweight. You can see the bottom of it is plastic. You can start to see the inside with the fiberglass. Just set this down on the side here a minute. And start to see the projector beam lights that I have in the front here. And they're all adjustable, of course. So I'm going to turn the key so you can see some of them illuminate what's actually going on real quickly here. If I turn the key on position. Okay, so these would be the main driving lights here. And when I took off the nose piece, there were little LED strips in the front. But the idea is that you could still drive it, you know, with the nose piece off if you had to. And then the turn signals. You can see I got a light in the front on each side for the turn signals. And the main wiring harness is right here. And what I did is I made channels in the frame for a lot of them to go down, but there's actually a little U channel welded on here to just, you know, make this a little bit neater. And then I got my relay, horn relay, high beam relay. I got a center grounding bus right here for all the ground connections. And then this is the main, in this case, fuse box, which was a marine product. So it's got stainless steel screws, makes it a little bit, in case there's, I mean, it's somewhat of an open vehicle, so it keeps any moisture issues with corrosion because of it being stainless. And then it's all labeled, you know, where it is. I have my, the horns are on each side of the vehicle. You can kind of see one here and one here. When I made the glove box, I wanted to make it pretty simple. That's actually a Walmart Walmart plastic bin, but I, you know, sized it up and then designed the dash around that. So the dash door, but from the standpoint of making something simple that slips in and out. And then there's the antenna for the radio over here. There's a alarm system with a motion sensor. And then this is the main steering rack that originally came from that Candy Viper, but it's very well made. I extended the arm lengths, and then, you know, the mounting points for everything here. And I could see all the bolts are nylocks, so, you know, nothing should be able to come loose. Other than that, to get the proper weight distribution, trying to get close to 50-50, I have the battery, which is a car battery, mounted in an utmost front position. When I chose a car battery, normally the motorcycle would have a smaller motorcycle battery, but motorcycle batteries usually don't last as long, and they have, of course, less amperage. So being I'm adding a lot of stuff that the motorcycle didn't have, such as a nice stereo system, alarm system, LED underbody lighting, it was, you know, best to go with something much bigger. This would be the called pedal box assembly, and I added, you know, micro switch for the brake lights over here. The original pedal box assembly started out from the Candy Viper. I mounted it further back. It's able to slide a little bit, but I'm not super tall, and I wanted to make it so other people. So I ended up just adding pedal extenders on here, so we're a little fancier. And then this would be the master cylinder reservoir here, and this would be the main brake cylinder. And the brake cylinder is designed for a three-wheeler, so it has a balancing where it sends most of the hydraulic fluid to the front wheels first. So the front wheels start to brake. You could tell when you raise the vehicle off the ground, you start to hit the pedal. The front wheels start to have friction before the back ones. So that's usually part of that design with three-wheelers. that in. And then, of course, this is the ratcheting system that lowers the reverse motor onto the rear wheel to take you back slowly. It's a solenoid because it's a high current draw. So you're taking the 12 volts right from the battery and sending it back there. So that pushing that button in just activates the solenoid switch that has bigger contactors to send back. I believe it's a 350 watt, 24 volt DC electric motor. There's my last version that's in there right now. On both sides, for the simple reason that the driver's side, I could just reach out and move it. But once you're seat belted in, if that mirror is out of whack, the only way to really adjust it would be to take the seat belt off and lean over. And of course, you can't do that if you're moving or you're ready to take off. It just became a little bit more of an obstacle. So,
and this mirror is
a simple power mirror.
And this mirror is adjustable from the driver's side?
Right. So on the driver's side here, there's a little button here on the dash, and this would be up, down, right, and left. So kind of like a power mirror would be on an original car. So you would think something this small wouldn't really need it, but anything that was ended up being more of a convenience, I ended up adding as time went on. The code with three-wheelers is to have reflectors, and the back would be a red one and the front would be a yellow one. So in order to attach the reflector is actually part of the mounting of this whole quarter piece over here. So what I did is just drilled a small hole in the center so I could put a Phillips screwdriver in there, and there's a hex bolt, stainless steel hex bolt on the other side with an eye lock, and that's one of 3 bolts that takes off this hole. I call it air intake on each side. And of course, if you haven't gotten already here, you can see the original carbon fiber look without its painting, anything being painted on it. And of course, when I went back and decided to paint it, what I did is I skim coated where I could so that the carbon fiber wouldn't show through, but you could see a little bits of it here. Give you a little bit of background of my life and what inspired me. My whole mechanical background came, I think, give it the credit all to my grandfather, who was the most mechanical person in our immediate family. So we had a bunch of family that lived together, and when anything broke, this is going back to the 1960s, he was Mr. Fix-It. So whether it was a radio, a vacuum cleaner, a toaster oven, he would fix it. And if he didn't know how to fix it, he'd figure it out. So he inspired me at the young age of probably around 7 or 8 years old. And right around the age of 15, I took auto shop. And in auto shop class, a gentleman came in one day, and we shared the class. I think this kid might have been a couple of years older, and he was left back. You needed to be 16 to get your junior license. So I think he was just turning 17, and he had a 57 Chevy that needed a lot of work that he had for sale. And he was telling a bunch of people, and I overheard it, and he only wanted $75 for it. I realized I'm not going to get my license for another year and a half. I thought, another fun project, why not have a car? So without telling my parents, I bought the car. It needed a clutch, needed a valve job. It had different color fenders on it. It was more of an eyesore than it was even mechanically failing. But in any event, the headliner was ripped on the top. The side door panels were in poor shape. But I remember talking to my friend Mike, and I bought it initially, and then Mike went in on it with me. And we went to the local hardware store, and we bought a little rattle can spray paint. And we wet sanded it. We did a little bit of Bondo. There were just a couple small dents, but it was like 4 different colors. We painted the whole thing blue. I took the head off because it needed a valve job, took it to auto shop, did the valves on it, and then went to a fabric store and actually bought material for the headliner, material for the side panels, and did that. So it was all a learning experience. It's like, everything you do in life, you don't necessarily learn traditionally. You learn it out of default, you learn it out of desire. Sometimes that's the best way to learn, because you actually remember things better. And if anything, you have to repeat them later on. Now you have the experience doing it. It's almost like when you do an internship when you're going to college. You do the formal course, but then you intern doing something physical where you can actually apply your skill. That kind of took me into the car realm, and around that time, I started selling off what I had left of go-karts and motorbikes and a bunch of engines and different parts. By the way, I bought it for $75. I gave it what they used to call the Earl Shive paint job at the time. That was like one of the chain painters in the Northeast at the time. But they would, I think it was like $99, $95 they would paint a car, something ridiculous. And it was a cheap paint job. But we did it with spray cans. It didn't look pretty, but it was all one color. And it actually looked magnificent compared to 5 different colors and Bondo and all the stuff that was going on before. So bought it for $75, 3 months later, never physically put it on the road, sold it for $250. So made a profit, which meant a lot of money at the time. So it actually convinced my dad that it wasn't a bad idea to buy it. And when he first seen it, when I had it towed over to the house, he seen it in the yard, and he was more about, get that thing out of here, you don't have a license, what are you doing with a car, He didn't mind the go-karts because they were small and they fit in the shed, but now I got something sitting on the side of our nice residential neighborhood, which would be like a nicer Sarasota neighborhood, and there's this car that was very hideous looking at the time. By the time I painted it and everything, it no longer looked so bad. So that was a big part of it. But anyway, kind of going past the car, and I took wood shop, metal shop, and auto mechanics in my high school days, just to learn. I was all about the physical aspects, and learn as much as you can about things that are going to be real life to you someday. I remember back in my high school days, back in 1971, Honda made their first car for the US market. It was called the Z600. And it was kind of like the smart car. It was a tiny little boxy car. It had a 2-cylinder air-cooled motor that only put out about 30 horsepower. But because it was so small, the car, it was lightweight, they were all about creating a vehicle that would get, at that time, considered astronomical gas mileage. Back when the average car was getting 15 miles per gallon, this got 38 miles per gallon right off the factory floor. And it was, because it was so small, it was a cheap car. Honda didn't even have a dealership network yet. So they made a deal with Pontiac that they would put it in the Pontiac dealerships. They only had one car and that was it. And they would sell it through Pontiac. Pontiac would get a commission and then you could buy the car. That was around the OPEC oil shortage back in the early 70s, 1972, 73. We had literally lines at the gas pumps, and sometimes it'd be like 15 cars. You'd be at a gas station for half hour, 45 minutes just to get gas. And of course I was, young and poor, so to speak, and gas prices were shooting up. I couldn't even fill the tank. I had to put, if I'm lucky, if I put a half a tank in, that means I'd only have to resurface, do that all over again a couple days later because it was getting 13, 14 miles per gallon. That put the mindset in me like, why don't they design a car that gets great gas mileage, but it's sporty? So now I'm going to go back to 1983. I have this new job. I'm 50 miles from work. I'm driving to work one day, and I'm thinking, I got to find a car that gets good gas mileage. So in those days, they had something, I think it was called Bylines. There was a newspaper that had all kinds of things, items for sale. So you look in the auto section. And I came in on a Saturday because I needed some extra work. And then I had time to kill, so I'm looking through the paper. And what do I come across but this Honda Z600? And say, I remember that car. That was that cute little car that they had in the Pontiac dealerships. I never drove one, but I knew it got this tremendous gas mileage. And right in the end, the guy put, 37 to 39 miles per gallon, And it only had like 35,000 miles on it. And he was asking, I think, $1,200. The reason it was so cheap, well, the car didn't go for a whole lot when it was new, but it was a boxy car, it was tall, and the weight ratio was a little bit too high up. He came off a off-ramp from the highway, and he didn't slow down for the curve, and he actually rolled it. He didn't get hurt, but the roof was concave in the center from rolling it. But the doors worked, the engine worked great, had low mileage, you know. I mean, at that mileage, it was a Honda, it didn't burn any oil, it ran great. And it was a simple motor because it was air-cooled. So I called the guy up, I went out to see him, and in any event, I think he took $900. I bought it on the spot. I got it home, and my wheels started turning. So when I got this Honda, I said, you know, I got a clean slate here. This thing's hideous looking. It was bright yellow. It didn't really have a lot of pizzazz. But mechanically, it was great. It had 38,000 miles. Going to get, 35,000 miles. It's going to get 38 mpg. Why not start with a clean slate? So I started my hand sketches at the time before I got into CAD. And I ended up cutting the top of the unibody off completely and designed a space frame that mounted to strategic points so that frame wouldn't flex. So there's like shock mounts and an area in the back. And I had a full raked windshield, kind of like at the time the Lamborghini Countach was. That was my thought. And then also the DeLorean had come out like a year earlier with the gull-wing doors. So I thought, oh, gull-wing doors, raked front end. It had a tiny back seat. I kind of had a square back. If you look at it now, it almost looked like a miniature version of a Cybertruck because it had a lot of square corners. In fact, when my sister called me one day when the Cybertruck was first announced, and she said, Jeff, I can't believe it. In 1983, you made a car that looks like the Cybertruck. So it's not a complete, but you could see certain points, how the Cybertruck has no curves. Everything kind of comes to it, almost like a little point. That's how this was, because I couldn't bend everything. I did bend the gull-wing doors, but after I made the space frame for it, I'm not a body guy per se. I did my share of Bondo, but it's like, to me, I was very intrigued with polycarbonate. So polycarbonate, GE's brand was called Lexan, and there was a company in Philadelphia called Roman Haas that was close to where I worked at the time, and their version was called Tuffac. And Tuffac was basically carbon fiber or Lexan, but just that was their brand name. It didn't take off as big as Lexan. So carbon fiber has kind of got some unique properties. It's got a modulus elasticity where you can bend it like a piece of sheet metal. You can take I'll just say a 1/16 inch sheet of polycarbonate and literally take it in your hands, a small skinny piece, and fold it on itself. And it won't snap like acrylic. Acrylic is much more brittle. And it's still, you can get it in with certain properties where it's scratch resistant. It's transparent, so it gives you a lot of ideas for painting. So I ended up buying 1/4 inch 4x8 sheets of it, and I made cardboard templates, and I cut the carbon fiber. I bought a heat strip bender so I can bend radiuses for the gull-wing doors on the side. I finally finished it off, and literally just over a month's time, probably like 40 days. I went from buying the car with the caved-in roof to like driving it with the polycarbonate. And what made it really unique in the end, besides the gull-wing doors and the raked windshield, now it looked like an exotic sports car that got 38 miles per gallon. And it's like, that's what I always wanted. Because the polycarbonate was clear, I decided don't paint the outside of the car, paint the inside. So I had built speaker cabinets years earlier, and they used to come out with, used to call it smoke glass for speaker cabinet tops. And you would actually either put black velvet or you would paint the opposite side of the tempered glass black, and it would look like it had, 1,000 coats of lacquer looking through that glass. So the car was painted a bright orange red with this painted from the inside out. So I no sooner get the car on the road, and I'm the new guy at the company I'm working for now, which was called Struthers Dunn. And I remember we have some dignitaries coming in from General Dynamics working on an aircraft, and they come in to see how our parts are going. And I'm invited to this meeting, and I go to this meeting, and there's 15 people at the table. and I'm like one of the only guys in there without gray hair. They're all older than me. I feel privileged to be there, but I'm working on this project. And after I got done building the car, I thought, geez, I wouldn't want someone to steal this. You know, it's so light, someone could actually, probably 4 guys could pick it up, load it into a flatbed. So I found an alarm that was a motion sensor with a pager. It was back in the days when pagers were first coming out. So I hooked up this alarm with the motion sensor, and if you shook the car, my pager would stop beeping. And I thought that's better than some annoying alarm where, you know, who's going to know what? At least I'll know something's going on. So I didn't have time to tweak the motion sensor. In those days, it was a mechanical thing. It used a spring, and a spring inside of it would oscillate, and it made contact with like the sidewalls of this metal container. And when it made contact, that would trigger the sequence to send it to the pager. And then you could dampen the spring so that it didn't go off with wind or the slightest movement. I just hooked it up. I remember it being like, you know, too late, I'll come back to it. But I thought, what the hell? I parked it, I brought it to work, I had the pager on. So now I'm back at this meeting with like 15 people from out of town. And we're halfway into the meeting, and my pager goes off. And the president of the company looks at me and he says, what's going on? What's that? I said, no big deal. I said, it's my car alarm. It's your car alarm? You parked right out here? I said, yeah, but, you know, I said, I didn't tweak it yet. I'm sure it's a false, that's 99% chance it's a false alarm. He said, well, we need to break for lunch. Let's all go out there. We'll check on your car on the way out. I was so embarrassed to think, like, what are they going to think of me? I built this, you know, and it was sharp looking, but still, you know, being judged by all these people. And in any event, as we're walking out the parking lot, I kept dismissing it, like, oh, this isn't necessary, I'll take care of it. And I, no, let's just check on it. Then I started telling him, what kind of car is it? He said, well, it started out as a Honda, but you won't recognize it as a Honda. He said, it looks more like a Lamborghini. I said, it's like if you took Lamborghini and Honda and meshed them. The more I talked about it, everybody was intrigued. So we were supposed to go to lunch. We ended up in the parking lot for almost a full, we'll say half hour, of them going over the car and how did you do this, and polycarbonate, and the paint's inside. It moved me up a couple notches in a good way, that at least this company employed about 750 people. It helped put me on the fast track, like, this guy's definitely an outside the box thinker.
So overall, how would you describe driving this thing?
Very simple. I mean, I'll take my hands off the wheel at 50 miles an hour. Very stable. No power steering, but you don't need it because it's so light. And other than that, my wife's got a little Toyota Celica, an older Celica. And I'd say it's driving, cross between driving a sports car and a go-kart. Dynamics, being low to the ground, the air in your face. Bye.